I'm a big fan of Donald Trump, by some measures, the biggest in Canada, but I can't deny that his tweets and his public statements helped derail Pierre Poilievre and install Mark Carney, the globalist oligarch, the environmental extremist. Obviously, the decision to put Mark Carney in the prime minister's chair was made by Canadian voters, and Donald Trump didn't get a vote. But Trump gave Carney a fake campaign issue, defending Canada against an American invasion or annexation. I mean, just listen to this insanity that Trump managed to make plausible for Carney.
We are facing the most significant crisis of our lifetimes because of President Trump's unjustified trade actions and his threats to our sovereignty. Our response must be to build a strong economy and a more secure Canada. President Trump claims that Canada isn't a real country. He wants to break us so America can own us. We will not let that happen. We're over the shock of the betrayal, but we should never forget the lessons. We have to look out for ourselves. We have to look out for each other.
Now, that didn't convince everyone. In fact, I don't even think it convinced a lot of people. There were almost 20 million votes cast in the election. I think the dumbest 1 million people actually believed Trump was going to invade or something, or at least they were afraid enough that they moved their votes to Carney. And now look at us. So yeah, I'm frustrated. Trump is America first, but as our friend from Breitbart.com, Joel Pollack, reminded me, it doesn't mean he supports politicians who are Canada first or Australia first or Israel first.
I think that Trump doesn't see himself as a kind of global leader of conservatism or populism or nationalism. He cares about those principles, but he ultimately just cares about America first. And so if he believes it's in America's interest to have a liberal Canadian leader, he doesn't mind helping the liberal leader. And he doesn't mind if he riles up the Canadian electorate to put one into power. Now, we might, again, think that it's unfortunate, and I happen to like the conservative leaders' policies in a number of ways, in many ways. And many conservatives in the United States were quietly rooting for the Conservative Party. At the same time, I do think that Trump believes that he can get a better deal from Canada in terms of trade if he applies this kind of pressure. Do I like it in every case? I don't. But that's, I think, what his America First policy is about. He just doesn't feel an obligation to the Conservative Party in Canada, and he wants to get the United States to a better place. And I think that it is possible that Trump believes that dealing with a weak liberal leader, and I do think Carney is going to be a weak leader. I think his policies are terrible, and I think the public will sour on them very quickly in Canada. I think Trump would prefer to have an unpopular and weak Canadian leader than to have somebody who is strong and able to articulate the Canadian national interest.
It's plausible that Trump prefers a weak Canada, though I don't see how that's in America's interest. But I am overjoyed today to see the latest news from the Trump administration, news that absolutely will affect us here in Canada. It's targeted at others, I think, Brazil, the UK, France, Germany, but you bet it hits us too. Let me read straight from Secretary of State Marco Rubio's Twitter feed just a few hours ago. He said, "For too long, Americans have been fined, harassed, and even charged by foreign authorities for exercising their free speech rights. Today, I am announcing a new visa restriction policy that will apply to foreign officials and persons who are complicit in censoring Americans. Free speech is essential to the American way of life, a birthright over which foreign governments have no authority." And then he had a follow-up comment. He said, "Foreigners who work to undermine the rights of Americans should not enjoy the privilege of traveling to our country. Whether in Latin America, Europe, or elsewhere, the days of passive treatment for those who work to undermine the rights of Americans are over." Absolutely amazing, so hopeful. There was a point in time when Trump lost the last election and when Biden was bringing in more censorship. I thought censorship was like a ratchet. It's something that only goes one way. That could only get worse over time, and it would be a combination of authoritarianism and big tech that would take away our right to dissent. I thought the First Amendment, even though it was under attack, was still amazing, but it was only for Americans. It would never apply to us in any way. But when Trump won, everything became possible. We had a premonition of what was coming when Mark Zuckerberg, who went so hard towards the Democrats, sort of saw the light and decided to fire his censors, stop censoring conversations about topics like transgenderism. And he gave this speech and he mentioned that the State Department promised to have his back. Remember this announcement?
We're going to work with President Trump to push back on governments around the world that are going after American companies and pushing to censor more. The US has the strongest constitutional protections for free expression in the world. Europe has an ever-increasing number of laws institutionalizing censorship and making it difficult to build anything innovative there. Latin American countries have secret courts that can order companies to quietly take things down. China has censored our apps from even working in the country. The only way that we can push back on this global trend is with the support of the US government. And that's why it's been so difficult over the past 4 years when even the US government has pushed for censorship. By going after us and other American companies, it has emboldened other governments to go even further.
Even a gazillionaire like Mark Zuckerberg can only stand up to foreign governments with the support of the State Department. Mark Zuckerberg is subject to the laws of any jurisdiction he works in. So if he could only push the First Amendment so far in France and UK and Canada without America's State Department backing him up. I think that's what we just saw today. Now, I think Marco Rubio is more interested in places like Brazil, where there's an out-of-control judge named Alexandre Moraes. Do you remember when we went down there, when he censored the entire Twitter platform for all of Brazil because he was trying to get certain critics of the socialist government banned? Twitter wouldn't do it, so he banned the whole app. I went down there with one of my colleagues for a day. Remember that? I'm here for a massive street rally in support of Jair Bolsonaro, the opposition leader and former president. But what's very interesting is how many signs are here for freedom of speech and for Elon Musk. There are also signs saying Moraes, fora Moraes, which means Moraes out. Who is Moraes? He is an extremist judge who has been conducting secret trials, censoring opposition leaders. Got to show you this. This guy right here, he's dressed up as Alexandre de Moraes. What do you have to say?
Nós temos que ter coragem, Brasil inteiro, a liberdade é o nosso maior patrimônio e nós temos que lutar pela anistia do povo que está preso injustamente, são pais e mães de família. Esse aqui é o retrato, é o escárnio da justiça que nós estamos hoje e não é só penalizar ele, Alexandre de Moraes, mas seus pares, pela inércia, pela falta de respeito pelo cidadão brasileiro. A Venezuela está ali do lado, nós vamos passar, a liberdade é o maior patrimônio, temos que lutar por nossa liberdade. Liberdade e bota pra torar!
That was incredible. It was incredible to see 100,000, 200,000 people march for freedom of speech. I really loved it. But I think Marco Rubio means Europe too. Germany, where they're trying to ban the Alternative for Deutschland Conservative Party. France, where they're trying to ban Marine Le Pen. The UK, when they've really cracked down on people from Tommy Robinson and Nigel Farage. Romania, which I think they just stole the election from the Conservatives. I was poking around the State Department on this, and they had an essay published by a State Department official. Samuel Sampson is his name. That's a great name. I want to read a couple of excerpts from it for you. And this is the view of the Trump administration. Let me read you. This is a little bit philosophical. He says, Europe has devolved into a hotbed of digital censorship, mass migration, restrictions on religious freedom, and numerous other assaults on democratic self-governance. It's interesting to me that they put mass migration in there. These concerning trends have only increased in recent years. In the United Kingdom, police are arresting Christians, such as Adam Smith Connor and Livia Tosaki Bolt, for silently praying outside of abortion clinics. You know, we've been one of the few Canadian outlets that's covered that. In 2023, over 12,000 British citizens were arrested for online posts, including comments critical of Europeans' migration crisis that authorities deemed to be, quote, grossly offensive. Yeah, that's just incredible. That's more than Russia arrested, by the way. This environment also restricts Europe's elections. As recently highlighted by Secretary Rubio, the Popular Alternative for Deutschland party was just labeled a, quote, extremist organization by German intelligence, which could lead to the party's exclusion from the electoral process. Leading French presidential candidate Marine Le Pen was charged with embezzlement and, departing from standard procedure, immediately banned from running. Restrictions have likewise occurred in Poland and Romania against select political parties or politicians. Simultaneously, Christian nations like Hungary are unjustly labeled as authoritarian and human rights abusers. Now that's very interesting because that's different than the tweets which talked about freedom of speech for American citizens. Here you have the U.S. State Department worried about entire European nations for the Europeans' sake. It's not mentioning any American citizens. Let me read a little bit more. Talking about the lawfare, talking about censorship. Quote, Americans are familiar with these tactics. Indeed, a similar strategy of censorship, demonization, and bureaucratic weaponization was utilized against President Trump and his supporters. What this reveals is that the global liberal project is not enabling the flourishing of democracy. Rather, it is trampling democracy and Western heritage along with it in the name of a decadent governing class and of its own people, afraid of its own people, pardon me. Let me just tell you again what I was reading from. That's not some op-ed in a newspaper. That is an official State Department essay by a senior State Department executive. This isn't the first that Marco Rubio has done. You may recall a few months ago, he shut down a major censorship office that was housed right in the U.S. State Department called the Global Engagement Center. What a neutral, vanilla name that is. They had funded censorship advocacy around the world, including here in Canada. It wouldn't surprise me if some of the funding from the State Department was deployed against Rebel News.